We'll call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
Evans.
Here.
Wood.
Here.
McEvers.
Here.
Gookin.
Yep.
Miller.
Here.
English.
Here.
If we would rise for the invocation, we have Pastor Ray Duran with us tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Good to be here. Join me as we pray. Our Heavenly Father, we are so thankful, Lord, for another day that you have given us, another day of life and breath. We're thankful that we're here this day, Lord. Thank you for our beautiful country that we live in, Lord. Thank you for our president. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful city that we have the privilege to live in. Thank you for Kootenai County, and thank you for all those who live and serve in this area. And Father, tonight we want to pray for this meeting. We pray that you would give wisdom to the mayor, to all the council members, and all that they have to do and all they have to go over this meeting tonight. And we trust you for your grace for everyone that's here tonight. And we give you all honor and glory and praise. And we ask all of this in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have any amendments to the agenda, and so we'll move on to public comment. Is there any member of the audience that would have public comment tonight? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is John Grimm. I'm one of the many sheriff candidates. I'd like to talk to you tonight about your sign ordinance. City of Coeur d'Alene has a sign ordinance that places additional restrictions on political signage, and the problem with that ordinance is it's been illegal since 2015. There was a ruling in the Supreme Court, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, it's Reed versus the town of Gilbert, that basically outlaws content-based sign ordinances. In a nutshell, if your code enforcement officer needs to read the face of the sign to determine if a specific section of code applies to it, it is illegal and it will not pass constitutional muster. I've been contacted by several supporters in the city who have been approached by code enforcement officers to have the signs taken down off of their private property, and naturally that's caused some consternation among them. I've attempted to resolve this discreetly. I've been in contact with City Attorney, Mr. Gridley, and we seem to be at some sort of impasse, I think. We have consulted with council, and we feel that should we bring forth a case, we would prevail. As a matter of fact, I have examples of where the ACLU has fought on behalf of people, and in every instance, the city either settles or places an amendment in the sign code immediately and gets their sign ordinance up to political, to pass political muster, or constitutional muster. Excuse me, I haven't had dinner yet, so it's the end of my day. What I would ask is that, Mr. Mayor, if you would please direct the city attorney to review Reed versus Gilbert and bring to the council an amendment to the code that brings it in line with current law. We hope we can resolve this peacefully. However, should the need arise to file and seek a declaratory judgment, I am prepared to do so. I can't stand by idly while the First Amendment rights of the citizens of this county are being violated. So I'm open for any questions, and that's all I have.
Wait,
yes, sir.
I think this is the first that any of us have heard of this, first that I've heard
Okay.
of it. I don't know that any of members of the council has heard this before.
Nope.
So I
Councilman
think what we need to do is we need to have
Was this on Facebook?
I asked, through one of my supporters, I asked this to be brought to the city attorney And we got an immediate response back that the city attorney thought that that the code was defensible based on clutter, which is, aesthetics is one of the exact items that Gilbert lost on.
So anyway, I think what we need to do is we need to have a chance for myself and council to consult with the legal opinion, and then we'll have someone get back to you.
Is there any kind of time frame I can expect on that? Because
After the
I've got
election.
people asking me to put signs back up, and I told them I'd get back with an
Well, I
with
don't
an
think,
answer.
Renata, I don't even think the time, what is the time for signs to go up there? Because there is a time frame.
Yes, I believe under our code, it's 60 days prior to the election.
Okay,
It could
so-
be 90, but I think it's 60.
So your election is when then?
May 19th.
Okay, so we have, we'll resolve it before then, we'll have an answer before then, but that's when they can put signs back up, would be 60 days from that date.
And that is the exact portion of the code that is illegal.
Okay, and
The
we
time
will,
restrictions.
we will talk to our attorneys. It's been time restricted for how long, Renata?
Well,
1890s?
probably, yes, since we
I understand your
enacted our sign
position.
code. Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, you will not win this case.
Okay, so we need to consult with our legal
Okay,
folks?
no, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, that's your legal opinion. We, legal opinions are all over the place, right? And so we will consult with the attorney, and we
Thank
will
you.
be back to you. So today is Tuesday, we'll be back to you by Friday.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay.
Well, just as, I guess I'm wondering, having been a guy with yard signs before and
Yeah.
all of that, I'm wondering what if you could wave the magic wand, I mean, is it that, it sounds like in part maybe the timeline, or is it the size of the signs, or that we got to pay a
Well,
fee, or what?
The crux of the matter is, if you allow signage, if you allow, say, a real estate sign, or even a temporary directional sign, then you allow signs. And allowing a real estate sign with no time restrictions, but putting a time restriction on a political sign favors commercial speech over political speech. And I think we can all agree that that's a huge problem. Sir, to answer your question, I don't have the answer. I know that there are lots of resources available to write code that will fall in line with this ruling, Reed versus Gilbert. But like I said, I'm not an expert on it. So.
And I would say, I mean, it's a legitimate thing.
But you know, one
take a
thing I
look
did
at,
want to
so.
offer is why I came here. We've seen candidates in the past ignore size restrictions, for instance. I'm not going to do that. That's not how I operate. And when we see something that needs to be changed, that's how I operate. So that's why I'm here tonight. So
Dan?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And just to right on what Dan said, so your key objection is the time restriction. You don't object to the size of the signs, or that you have to pay a fee?
Oh, no, the fee is inconsequential. I don't know the legality of that. The time restrictions and the size are a legal issue. My issue is the time restrictions. I think,
What about placement?
I mean, it's private property. You have the right to limit placement on right-of-way and things like that. There are some sticking points with declaring signs to be traffic hazards and whatnots, because apparently you need to demonstrate something that's beneficial to the government, and that's difficult to do. For example,
Beneficial
if
to
you
the
have if you allow temporary directional signs that encroach on someone's vision, then political signs would be allowed the same way. I don't agree with that. I think there should be some sensible guidelines so that we don't have a farm of signs in someone's front yard. But I think you can do that legally, just like you can probably limit the number of, what do they call it? Every week we put our garbage out of the street, but sometimes people choose to sell it on their front yard. Yard sale. Yard sale signs. You know, we can probably limit the amount and placement of those. So I guess what needs to happen is the ordinance needs to conform every sign. Size restrictions on for sale signs can't be any different than size restrictions on political signs.
And in your,
But I think they're plenty big enough.
I assume you've researched this, so in your research, nowhere else in Kootenai County is there a political yard sign permit?
Now, permit's a different story. I don't think permits are illegal. Coeur d'Alene by far has the most restrictive limitation. The only other entity is Lakes Highway District that has a time restriction, I think, but I may have an old piece of data on that. Post Falls has no restrictions. Hayden really has no restrictions other than in the right-of-way. And we need only look at those cities anyways, that it doesn't seem to be a problem.
Thank you.
All right?
Mr. Grimm, we will get back to you by Friday.
Mr. Mayor, I really appreciate that answer. I'm pleasantly surprised. And as I'm learning, I want to thank you for the effort that you have all undertaken seeking political office, because it's really quite an undertaking, as you all probably understand. So thank you. Have a good night.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else wishing to give public comment tonight?
Or who wants to sue us? I mean,
Anyone else? Okay, we will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement tonight? Kiki?
I just have one. The North Idaho Centennial Trail is turning 30 years old. I can't believe that, but 30 years old, and they're having a party to celebrate that the 23rd of December at 6 p.m. at Seasons, and it's open to the public. So happy birthday, North Idaho Centennial Trail.
date again?
The 23rd,
January.
January. Sorry, I thought I said Thursday, the 23rd. Sorry. Thank you. Get that down.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the snow is melting, but just to let everyone know, I've heard from the chief of police and just heard from our street superintendent that right now the city is out tagging carbergs, which are those cars that are under a lot of snow that haven't been moved in a while. And those are being tagged, and they will be towed soon if they're not moved. So if you have a car on the street that you own that's been tagged, move it now so it doesn't get towed. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything? I had one piece of business, appointments of Michael Pereira to design review and Jim Chapkus and Patrick Murray to parking.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just add that I've been appointed to an ad hoc committee to work with Ignite on the RFP for Atlas.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Woody, consent calendar?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move for approval of consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 200005.
Second.
How many zeros was in that, Woody?
I said 3 zeros.
And a 5, okay. So motion
Pause.
and a second. Any further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Gookin,
Aye.
English,
Yes?
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Motion carried. Now on to other business. This is resolution number 20-006, approval of a license agreement with Sulco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless, for the use of city property in connection with the operation of a wireless network. Mike Gridley has a staff report for us.
Good evening. I get to explain to you this agreement that would allow Verizon to install small cell antennas, devices that we all use to communicate, our cell phones communicate. It is an area that is governed by the Federal Communications Commission. In other words, an area that they have determined is a good thing. And cities have told cities, you really can't pass a lot of rules, you can't do a lot of regulations. And so with that background, we've come forward with a agreement that's been negotiated with Verizon that provides for a payment, an application fee of $500, and then $270 per installation. Don't ask me how any of this works or why your cell phone doesn't work. We have Jason Verdusco from Verizon, who's here and is an expert in all matters cell phone. Now, he's very knowledgeable and can explain the antenna devices and how they will be placed, and we'll show a PowerPoint to demonstrate that. It's something that's going on in a lot of cities as we all start using cell phones or smartphones more. Their demand is increased. And so the way to provide that, I think the technology is these small cell devices rather than the big antennas. And so with that, you can ask me questions about the actual agreement. Be glad to answer those. And then Jason can explain a little more about the small cell technology.
Questions for Mike. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, you said something, and I just caught the end of it, that the cities can't pass rules or regulations on this? What does that mean?
We can regulate aesthetics up to a point. We can't say no. We can't say, we don't really want you in our town. And it's the Federal Communications Commission, a federal entity, preempts state or local regulation. It's been litigated by cities challenging that, and cities up to this point have lost. There's still some challenges going on, but Verizon has been good to work with, I would say, in that they're honoring our wireless facilities placement ordinance. So, for example, if we put a box, they put a box down, like our traffic signal boxes, they will wrap it or submit plans to disguise it or hide it in some way. So there hasn't been pushback about some of our own regulations like that, but basically, yeah, we can't say no to them. And the fee is set by federal law.
It's curious because I researched this and I found cities have banned this. San Mateo, California banned it.
Not something I'm aware of.
California's special.
But it wasn't just California. There were other cities as well that basically said no.
And so I guess I would ask how current is that? Because there have been appeals in the Ninth Circuit, and the cities have lost.
Okay.
So I don't know if that was one where they said no and got challenged and lost, but I know it wasn't I know some cities did say no, but at the end of the day, the federal courts have said, cities, you can't do that.
Well, so much for land of the free. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Christine?
Mike, could you tell me who wrote the agreement, and then if you would go over the quick terms of the agreement? It looks like 10 years, but then there's a supplemental term that seems to just happen. Could you just review that for us? Who wrote it, first of all?
This is basically an agreement that is a boilerplate that was submitted by Verizon. We reviewed it, went through it. It met, and there were negotiations about some details on it, but it was basically originated by the industry. It is a 10-year term, and then there are, I'm trying to find the section on the supplemental term is another 10 years. It can be canceled, or actually 2 5-year periods, the renewal period. It can be terminated, subject to those renewals. So,
Terminated by Verizon or by the city?
by either side, I believe, if for cause.
Don't remember the for cause.
Licensee may cancel 180 days by giving us 180 days notice. Looking for license or termination.
That's on page 6.
Oh, license or
Yeah.
termination. So basically, upon any default, we can terminate it, and then we can terminate it with or without cause upon 12 months' notice to the licensee, to Verizon.
Okay, thank you.
Woody?
Mike, this isn't taking towers away. this supplemental 2 towers, right?
Yeah, I think Jason can probably explain the technology better than me. So there'll still be towers. In fact, I think there's one working through the
Pearson
planning
Field,
system
right.
right now. But these will be, so instead of big towers around, as I understand it, there will be these smaller cells.
So the towers create an income for us, for the water department. We have them on the water tanks and things like that. Is there a cash flow coming off of these also on some
Yes.
kind of a yearly piece?
Yes, there's, excuse me, $270 per antenna.
Unit? Okay,
And that's mandated by federal law. That's the maximum
all right.
that can be collected by
So
cities.
this is the feds on use of right-of-way for cellular. This, it seems like we got jacked around on the cable on use of right-of-way.
Yeah, and I think, without getting into details, I think at that level, they've decided that it is in the country's best interest to promote this technology and to get people like us out of the way of technology coming forward. That's a philosophical debate that we could have, whether that's a good thing or bad thing for communities, but at a federal level, they've said, no, we think this is a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? All right, if you wanted to invite our
Jason?
Verizon rep up.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm here just to kind of help this process along. Obviously, Mike was talking about this the small cell franchise and a right-of-way agreement. Really, I like to start with the what, behind the why, type of deal. So I put together just a quick presentation for us, and so that we can help see what we're doing and why we're doing it right now. As you can see, these are just some kind of basic statistics. 94% of people under 40 have a smartphone, right? 80% of 911 calls originate from a cell phone now. And it's not just the wireless cell phones that we're moving into. We're moving into this kind of like this next industrial age of technology, essentially. And so it's not just people using cell phones. It's actually people to machines, machines to machines, and machines to people, right? And so the trends, they just keep going up and up and up. So obviously, since 2010, 2017, mobile data usage has gone up 39 times, right? I think it was like maybe 10 years ago now, my family went to just wireless only. We don't have a landline at our home. And so these are just some of the statistics that we're seeing. And because of that, it's not just the wireless, handheld devices. We're talking smart cities, right? Smart communities. So I'm working with all sorts of cities in Eastern Washington and all throughout Idaho. With how do we connect with smart health? Public safety is a big thing right now. Parking, pollution, all these smart transportation aspects. And so the future continues to grow and grow, and now we're even talking about VR, so virtual reality, and AR, augmented reality applications. And I'm not just talking about gaming, I'm talking about for work aspects as well, and growing companies. And so we continue to build and build in this wireless network, right? This idea that we're connecting people to people, and that's essentially what we're doing. So I think I put let me go back here. We continue to, as you brought up, Councilmember, it's not just these macro antennas that we see like on water towers or these really large poles. We're building small cell devices to connect at a higher capacity, higher density level, right? And so because of this, there's a lot going on right now, and that's why I'm here is to continue to be a resource to the local cities, especially on the east side, northern panhandle of this area. And so here's a few things that the FCC order came out with. limiting rates, permitting costs, shot clocks, and design standards. These are all things that I've worked with staff on already, and the city really has been primed and has already written good, for the most part, pretty good cell phone or small cell codes. So I think we're pretty much in alignment on those things.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So do you guys choose to bring the service, or if the city requested for certain services or hire that higher tech thing, is
Yeah.
that something you guys do or we get together and?
It's a both and. Essentially right now, because the data usage continues to grow, our radio frequency engineers are looking at the network and saying, hey, we're having issues. And instead of continuing to build these really large macro towers, here's a really good solution, right? That helps everybody. Okay.
Thanks.
So this is kind of the difference between a macro antenna and a small cell antenna. Macro antenna is approximately 8 feet tall. The small cell antenna is about 2 feet, right? And so it's a difference of macro antennas being anywhere between 70 to 150 feet in the air. Small cell antennas are attached to existing poles and infrastructure in the right of way. So this is the thing I was going to show you. So traditional wireless will put a macro tower on the hillside, or a water tower somewhere that has high visibility. And then what happens is, think of it. I always like to think of it as like watering acreage, like a field, like a big irrigation pivot. You use these big irrigation pivots to water large landscapes. Well, if there's a dry area, you're not going to go put another large pivot in. You're going to put a localized sprinkler head, right, to get that area. So that's essentially what these small cells do. So small cells are typically deployed in clusters, or what we call polygons. And so it takes that network area, and so say there's a specific need downtown, right? And as many people as we have come into the area for different events, all of a sudden those networks get bogged down, and it's like, hey, how do we solve the solution? We don't want to put a big macro tower downtown, so we use small cells attached to different utility poles, light poles. We can use standalone poles as well. Now, I know this is kind of a big one too, right? So radio frequency, health and safety. The FCC sets the standards for these, and in order for Verizon to be Verizon, we have to adhere to these things. Like, we can't, they set the limits, and the FCC, they employ or elicit information from FDA, American Cancer Society, OSHA, the EPA, and so these are, I put a couple links down here. I've actually created a website too for the city of Spokane, because we launched a pretty large small cell program in the city late last year, and we're building upon that this year in the city. And so I put together a website, and actually I can get you get the council members the link to that, and so that has RF safety on there as well. So I'm just gonna kind of get this. I'm gonna get to, so all of our poles that we attach to, there is clear labeling and a disconnect for any city workers, lineman workers. We have an agreement with Avista. We've been building on Avista poles in the city of Spokane and Spokane Valley. So we have a very comprehensive safety program, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to go home safely to their families, right? So I wanted to kind of get to actually what these things actually look like. So we've launched in Boise and Spokane. And so here's some ACHD traffic poles. So this picture on the left, as you can see, so I guess let me take a step back. So essentially what a small cell is, you're going to have some antennas, and then you're having an equipment box. And the FCC limits the size of the equipment to 28 cubic feet, which is essentially a 3 by 3 by 3 box, right? And so if you look, so at the very top of this pole on the left-hand side, wish we had a laser pointer.
You can use the mouse.
Oh, I guess I could, huh? There we go. All right, so right here, so that is our 4G antenna. And then this is the equipment cabinet right here that just is placed at the top of the light pole. And then here's, depending on, so small cells can be 4G and 5G. And so these small cells in Boise are 5G. And so we have So 3 panel antennas that wrap the pole right here. So this 4G helps with capacity, and this 5G antennas are bringing Verizon's ultra wideband 5G network. Okay. And so here is simply a 4G antenna. So we have the 4G antenna right here in this shroud, along with the cabinet right here as well. So here's our 2 designs that we have in the city of Spokane. These are on Avista poles. And so essentially Avista wanted everything encased in the what we call our pole topper design. And so we have our 4G antenna in here, and with the 4G equipment, and then the 5G antennas, those can't be shrouded. And so we place them as closely to the pole as we possibly can. And then we have another design as well that kind of mirrors what we see typically on utility poles. We call our crossbar design. And so we have the equipment in this crossbar, the 4G antenna right here, and then the 5G antennas right here. And so this is, so we're working with Avista on a steel light pole design. And essentially it's just that pole topper design encased within the Cobra light head. And the city of Spokane also, we have the decorative acorn light design, so it's essentially mirroring that as well. Yeah. So I mean that's essentially a high-level overview, but really I'm here to just be a resource to the council, and provide any resources, questions, answers, things like that. So.
Question, is there any power requirement? Any?
Yes, power does need to be brought to these small cells. And so we work with the local power providers. So we have with the Vista, Coeur Electric, we're still working on that agreement.
So when you when these are powered up, then who's paying for who pays?
I believe in the agreement we have a flat rate that we've depending on who we're attaching to. So if it's a Vista pole, we have a flat rate clause in there for the agreement. I believe we have a flat rate for power in the Coeur d'Alene, the city one as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions? Dan?
Just wondering what the timeline is for this in Coeur d'Alene?
It just depends. So once, obviously, the agreement is the first step. Right, that just gives us the right to be in the right of way. So that's all this does. We still have to work with the city on putting together applications and following the city's the land use process as well. So I mean, we could see some by the end of the year. Could be next year. It just all depends on how fast we can build. Essentially, small cells is kind of like that new technology. It's the wave, but at the same time too, essentially think of it, we're building. So each carrier has a 4-lane highway, and essentially what Verizon's doing with our small cells is we're building another 4-lane highway, and so it's going to take a while to build new transportation lines all throughout the area. So,
Woody.
So I see you are doing 4G and 5G. Does that mean that 4G eventually goes away and everything's 5, or is it? Do you know?
Potentially, but that time frame, it would be like going from 3G to 4G when we had 3G for quite some time, and then with the evolution of 4G, and that's essentially why the FCC, I think, placed the order that it did, is to help accelerate, because there's a lot of economic prosperity that comes from wireless networks, right? I think it was, I can't remember, was it China won the 3G, and it boosted their economy. The U.S. we won the 4G race, and it's brought us companies with all sorts of different apps, whether it's Uber, Lyft, all sorts of those companies. So it's definitely it brings an economic impact to the area, so to the country.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I boned up on this quite extensively.
I'm glad you did.
Kind of a nerd, and so this kind of technology is fascinating. I mean, I do stuff with technology, cell phones, and studied up on the 5G. So to answer your question, Woody, 4G towers talk to the 5G cells, and that's how it gets spread around. But it's getting crowded because there's so much mobile devices and things that use mobile devices, like it said in Jason's first slide. But I have some questions regarding the millimeter radiation that comes out of these things.
Yep.
And that was why it had been banned in cities. I don't know if it's still banned in the cities, and that's why some countries have banned it as well. And even on the OSHA website, it says that the exposure limits for this type of radiation have not been established.
Okay.
So there's nothing, I mean, and I don't think the FCC has anything established either because it just hasn't been tested yet. And we don't know. On the one I think it's slide 13, where you listed the, you first start to talk about health and safety. So the OSHA site, like I said, it doesn't talk about standards. ANSI is just going to list what the definitions are. They aren't going to talk about safety or health. The links that you gave, the one from the FCC doesn't mention 5G at all, and the other link that you provided is broken. And then I was intrigued by the warning sign on the cell itself, which was on your slide 15. And I decided to check out what the label actually says, and I found the label. And it says, radio frequency emissions at this site have been evaluated for potential RF exposure to persons who may need to work near these antennas. RF exposure at 8 feet or closer to the face of this antenna may exceed the FCC public exposure limits. RF exposure at 5 feet or closer to the face of this antenna may exceed the FCC occupational exposure limits. And then there's other information as well. So Verizon says that when their technicians climb the poles to work on these, that there are limits and they actually have to go through lots of training. But our guys are going to be climbing our poles, and Avista guys are going to be climbing. Do you require that kind of training for our people as well?
Yeah, and so actually what we've done is we've actually put together trainings for linemen. And so we've, past 2-3 years, we've worked with Avista and given trainings and workshops on how to work safely around antennas.
Okay. So this millimeter technology, microwaves basically,
Okay.
It doesn't go through buildings.
Correct.
So in a situation like where you have the resort and you may have a large convention where we don't get cell service because there's no towers, how does this help?
Yeah, so it's limited. I wouldn't say it doesn't go through buildings. So it is limited, and that's where you have in-building systems now. And so we actually have macros, you have small cells, and you have in-building systems, or what are known as DAS systems, so digital antenna systems. And so that helps with, very similar to like most airports that you go to, it is really hard unless you connect to the Wi-Fi to really get a good connection in there, in any, many airports, I'll say.
And so you did mention, and I wrote it down, you talked about the economic prosperity that's tied to this. So Verizon has a lot riding on this too. I mean, you have customers who are looking to provide service to, and I mean that's probably what really motivates this. I mean, you want to bridge the gap right now between the 5G technology and then whatever comes next, which I believe is Li-Fi, but I don't know a lot about it. So, but that's going to eventually come over, and that solves a lot of these issues because it's light-based and there's no radiation, there's no ionizing radiation or anything with a Li-Fi. So I'm just guessing that you did smile when I said that. So.
Oh, I'm just waiting. Is there a question do you have, or
No, I'm just
okay,
concerned about the safety of these things. And actually, in the contract itself, it says that harmful interference, the right of way, you're only permitted to install things that are the type of frequency will not cause harmful interference, which is measurable in accordance with existing industry standards with this equipment. But there are no industry standards. I mean, it's just for safety. There's the technology standards, but as far as the safety standards, I don't know if there's anything that will, there's a lot of stuff out there that talks about it, and there's a lot of nutball stuff too. I mean, there is.
There is a lot.
I mean, you mentioned China. Well, China uses the technology to spy on its own citizens. I don't think we're there yet, but there's a lot of stuff that they talk about, and I have concerns about the safety. I mean, these things, the way this technology works is these things triangulate where your cell phone is, and they focus a beam of information right to your phone. And so if you're walking downtown and there's 3 of these microcells here, there's 3 beams that are shooting through your head when you're talking on the phone. And we don't know what this technology is going to do, what the long-term effects are, because there's no There's no data. There's no long-term data. It's new technology. And that's what people have posed concerns about. And it's just stuff that I would have concerns about too, especially, we got kids and stuff who use cell phones and people who use them, and it just seems like, wow, it's kind of cool. I mean, on one hand, that you can have a cell tower that figures out where you are and where you're going and targets a beam right at your phone. But it's also kind of scary too, because then what's that beam doing? I don't know.
Well, there's not really a question there, but would you like?
I'm ranting.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing the question.
You gotta watch the show.
But I will kind of speak to some of that. So 5G essentially is still just radio waves, right? I mean, it's the same radio waves that have been around for the past 50, 75 years, right? And so these are the spectrums that have been in use. A lot of them are being repurposed, from different things. So it's not something new, right? It's not like it's the same conversation I think that people are having when we went from 3G to 4G, right? And so when we say 5G, we have to be very mindful of what we're discussing, and because, like you said, there are lots of things out there that if you go on the internet right now, you can find all the reasons why coffee is actually bad for you. And we all know that, most of us here drink coffee, right? It's a good, but, and so I have no problem sourcing, the council with more information regarding 5G. I just didn't want to put all of that in this information or in this PowerPoint. And so, like I said, I'm here to be a resource, and so we have consulted a couple different PhDs that work extensively in radio frequencies. We've put on a community engagement meeting in the Boise area and hired an expert in radio frequencies. And so I want to make sure I give you all the latest and greatest information so that we can make a decision. Because even in the midst of all the information that's out there, people still are going to fall on one side or the other. And so I want to make sure that you guys have at least all the information. And keep in mind too, not all small cells are 5G. Like I showed you in Boise, our 4G small cells are just really helping to densify the existing network. Because what happens is you have a lot of people that are using data, and they want their not only their cell phones but their other connected devices, their smart homes to work as well. And so that's what these do. These small cells do help with that as well.
And I do have a legitimate question. So
yes.
In the agreement, there was an Exhibit 1 that was missing. I mean, we don't have it in our packet, and it was supposed to be a map of where these things are supposed to go. Mm-hmm. So can you give me a macro sense of where you mentioned downtown, but will these things be placed in neighborhoods? Will they be placed all over the city?
It just all depends. So I think I'd have to look at the existing network need, but part of that is done when we apply for the small cell, because you have a SLA, the site license agreement, and that's part of the agreement as well. And so when we apply, so say we have 15 small cells that we want to cover, just let's say right around the freeway area, right? And say that's just an arbitrary area. Or we can even use downtown area, because of all the different traffic that comes through, just winter and especially at the summertime. We would work with the city and say, hey, it looks like we probably need maybe 12 small cells in this area to help, because the network is just bogged down. And then once those are applied for and they're approved, then those get put on with the SLA, the site license agreement, and then gets added as an addendum to the exhibit. So that's why there's nothing there right now, because really this is just a blanket right-of-way agreement that allows Verizon to be in the right-of-way. Because if we didn't have this, we couldn't then start applying to the city for permits, right? And so once we get those permits approved, then that gets added to the agreement.
So permits come from us or the FCC?
From the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so eventually, theoretically, these could be everywhere in the city, by people's homes, schools, parks?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, didn't we start the presentation from our attorney saying we really don't have any wiggle room here because the federal government has said this isn't a matter for us to decide?
That's a great question. And if we all pulled out our smartphones right now, which I had an opportunity to do, we could go to the cityofsanmateo.org and look at their small cell infrastructure FAQs. And that answers questions that Councilmember Gookin asked. Can the city prohibit installation of wireless telecommunications facilities? Answer's no. It goes on to explain that. And then actually, this is a pretty cool site, so San Mateo has some things going on. There's questions, a frequently asked question about which agency establishes limits for radio frequency, RF, and it's the Federal Communications Commission. And they've got a link to, so if you go to fcc.gov, it's got RF safety FAQs. So I'm not arguing for or against, but I'm saying there is some information out there, but I think that site confirms that we don't, or it's my understanding, our research, it's been challenged. We can't, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has dictated what we can and can't regulate. We can regulate aesthetics to some extent, within reason, basically is the language they use. But we can't say, no, you cannot have this in your town.
Okay, thank you.
Kiki, did you have a question?
I kind of had a follow-up question, in that once you say you determine through your means that there's 12 towers that may need to be put by this freeway, then does the demand, or how do you decide which one of those towers have 4G or 5G in them?
The 4G aspect is a demand. 5G is really this new wave of technology, and so we want to put it in public areas, which would allow not only the public to use these super speeds to download certain things, but at the same time too for businesses as well. Verizon's recently partnered with Amazon Web Services, and there's some pretty amazing edge cloud computing that's starting to take place. And so really we're at the very beginning stages of what could take place, and that's, we have to build the foundation before we can really
So
launch.
at this point, you don't know how many towers, and you don't really know
No.
how many will be 4 or 5.
Right,
But you would
correct.
probably lean towards 5 since it's the newest technology, and that's about the sideboards that you have?
No, because 4G technology, we still need 4G, right? 4G is the backbone of our wireless network here in the U.S., right? And so, 4G phones are what we have, right? The first 5G phone just came out this year. There's a couple more coming out this next year. But the reality is we need 4G. We need good 4G coverage, and people are demanding it, right? I mean, it'd be like the city trying to build a street that went to nowhere. It's like, why would you do that, right? You wouldn't
But we're the
invest
government,
money.
we do that all the time.
Yeah. So, did I answer your question,
Yeah, I think
Councilmember?
so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did at least want to pull this up. So this is a website that's created for our small cells in Spokane. And so just talks about why small cells are here. It gives a video of what kind of small cells are, an animated focus. Some different photos of our actual small cell installations, a place to contact me with any questions, and then just frequently asked questions. What is a small cell? Why small cells? Pretty much everything I've explained here. It does take I've spoken to lots of city councils and county commissioners. It takes about 3 or 4 times to hear this stuff before you really wrap your mind around it. So this is a resource. Here is a link to the FCC health and safety questions cell phone for the FDA and the EPA as well. I'm not surprised that some of these links, not these ones are active, but the one that you pulled up are broken because this information is coming in so quickly. I mean, there are studies that we do use that are 5G studies. Even talking with one of the RF lab managers at Gonzaga, they have an RF lab, so a radio frequency lab, and the difference between ionizing and non-ionizing radio frequencies and how there's a spectrum. And yes, if you get too close to an antenna, you can, and if you hug that thing, yes, that's not good for you, right? But at the same time too, like, yeah, so we want to be mindful of those things, and like I said, get you guys the information. So this is available, and I can get this to Mike here, and or I can just email the city council as well. So, yeah.
Other questions?
Just a comment, one thing that jumped out at me that was interesting, the statistic about the average household having 13 connected devices, and told my wife, I said, man, that, maybe a household with a bunch of teenagers or something, but then an old couple like us, and we started counting up, 3, 4 Kindles, we each have a laptop, the main computer, and the other things, and we got up to about 12 or 13. So, it's going to be, the demand is there from the public. So,
correct.
Too, that's what's really going to drive this. And are we going to really tell them, oh no, we're going to keep you in the back ages? And so,
yeah. And that's why I'm here. I came here because Mike had said, hey, this would be really good for you to be here. Talk with the council. Obviously, this is about the agreement and getting that opportunity to move forward. But at the same time, too, this isn't the end of the conversation. I'm here, available. I'll leave my business cards so that you guys have a way to contact me. So.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mike, do you have a closing? Are you the closer, or are you ready?
Check my smartphone, I might have a message.
I think Woody's ready to roll here.
I'm ready. I'd like to move for approval of resolutions 20006, approving license agreement with Cello Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless for the use of city property in connection with the operation of a wireless network.
second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. Dan?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to shock everyone and vote against this.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't think the safety level's there, and we have an obligation to protect the safety of our citizens. We banned smoking in the park for safety. I think this is along the same lines. The technology doesn't have enough data to prove that it's safe yet, and I wasn't elected to roll over every time the federal government barks. I think they're wrong in this, just like the FAA was wrong when they approved the 737 MAX. So I'm going to vote against it.
Any other further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
No.
Motion carried. Thank you, Mike. So now we'll move on to the public hearing. This is V-19-03. This is vacation of a portion of Celtice right-of-way adjoining the southern boundary of tax number 8882, tax number 10490, and tax number 22364 in the city of Coeur d'Alene. Dennis Grant is here for the staff report. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. Greetings, Mayor and Council. Okay. So our decision point today is, should the city vacate the portion of right-of-way along the north side of Celtice Way east of Atlas Road to the applicant William L. Sheldon. So I have a aerial view for you that shows where this is located. You can see I-90 and Celtice Way, and this is the Coeur d'Alene Sprinkler if you're associated or with that business. And this is basically a remainder piece that is left over after the Celtice Way project.
Wasn't
We
that
did
the old, that was the old I-10, right?
Yeah, yep. And we did a similar thing with the Atlas property, that's the city property. And I believe I've got a phone call from Honda wanting to do a similar thing here in the future. So, not surprising, but anyway, that's an aerial view. So, a little bit of history for Dan. The 4-lane divided highway known as Celtice Way was originally constructed in 1926 as US Highway 10, and the portion from the Coeur d'Alene to the Idaho-Washington boundary being replaced by I-90 in 1971. This portion of Celtice Way adjoining the area of request has a right-of-way of approximately 200 feet. The vacation of the requested right-of-way would not have any financial impact on the city and would add approximately 0.24 acres to the future county tax roll. It would be a benefit to the municipality as tax revenue and to the landowner whose lots adjoin the strip of usable property. I'll show another exhibit. Okay. This will be an exhibit that goes along with the ordinance. The purpose of this request is to vacate the unused portion of right-of-way along the north side of Celtice Way, east of Atlas Road. Celtice Way was recently constructed, widened, and rebuilt. As a part of this construction, a bike path was added along the north side of Celtice Way, and the applicants are proposing to vacate this remainder portion of Celtice Way, which is 2 feet north of the current trail or slope as shown on the exhibit that you see there. And we did the same thing with the Atlas piece. We left 2 feet for when they're plowing the trails, that you can put some snow over there or for whatever we need that piece for. The request would not have any impact on future expansion of Celtice Way corridor since the current project is complete, and the development review team was informed about this vacation. Since there's an existing water main, 12-inch water main, we'll need to get an easement for the water department. So I got that going. I was hoping to have that tonight, but it'll be at the next council meeting for that. So the recommendation is City Council should approve the vacation action per Idaho Code Section 50-1306 and to vacate the property to the applicant William L. Sheldon. And I'd like to add to the motion, whoever makes the motion, with the agreement to the preservation of an existing water line easement. Just add that little statement to the motion. That'll be coming forth. Thank you.
Dennis, so let's get that again there. On the motion to adopt this council bill, you would like to add what now?
With the agreement to the preservation of an existing water line easement.
Okay. Question, Dennis, is so we see this often on vacations where it says that it would be a benefit to the city as tax revenue to add this to the taxable
Sure.
Parcel. How does that process
Sure.
happen? So this is going to be recorded
Yep.
as an addition to the property. How is the county? How do they know, okay, this guy has a little bit more land, we're going to assess that differently?
Sure, that's a great question. So now the city does not deed over this right-of-way, but the applicant will have to, through the county, will add that portion to their property, and it'll be a tax number. And so like you said, there's already three tax numbers, so now there will be 4 tax numbers with this property with the legal description that goes with the ordinance. On the ordinance, there's an exhibit, which is what you see here, and then also a legal description of that piece to be vacated, which the county will add to their existing pieces there in this case.
So how is that recorded then? So it's not the city that records it, it's the applicant that records it?
We record the ordinance with the legal and the exhibit. That's all we record. And then the consultant, which is H2, will work with the property owner to get the proper agreements recorded with the county to add to the piece of property.
Okay.
Which I would be a grant deed or some sort of a. But we do have the legal and the exhibit in our ordinance, which I don't know what the rules are for the city. I don't think there's any we're just giving back right away. When the plat came in, this is a unique situation because it's old highway district that was given to the city of Coeur d'Alene, but in a plat situation where they are dedicating right away for a street or an alley, they give it to us for free, and so therefore we give it back to that person if we don't use a street or an alley. That happens sometimes downtown. In the new subdivisions, that wouldn't happen, but yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah. Council questions. Christie?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. 2 questions, if I may. Mr. Grant, first of all, how do you do the follow-up to make sure that the landowner files the proper paperwork with the county?
That's a great question. So what I'll do is after the council approves the ordinance and the resolution, the city clerk will put it in the newspaper, and then I'll send an approval letter to the consultant and the applicant, and when I do that, I'll check with the city map, which we all can see or have access to, which comes from the county through our GIS. I'll look in there and see if that's has been done.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question, you talked about needing a preservation of the existing water line.
Yes.
So do you put restrictions on what they can do with the property? I mean, is it a problem if they pave over it, or they can do whatever they want?
That's a great question too, actually. There's no, we can't put conditions on a vacation.
Okay.
But there's an existing water line that needs to be taken care of if we're going to vacate that property. So therefore, we need to get that easement in this case, which will be coming to you. There's one on the consent calendar for today, as a matter of fact. There'll be one similar to that at the next council meeting for this piece. And so, did that answer your question?
Well, sort of. I guess I don't really understand how you need to protect the water line. Is it fine for them to pave over it?
Okay, I got you. So it's fine now because it's in existing right-of-way. So all the utilities you have in front of your house, the sewer, water, stormwater, whatever utilities in there is already in an easement per se because it's in the city right-of-way, so it's protected. But if we give away some of that right-of-way and there's an existing utility there, we have to protect that.
So we have the right to dig it up, dig through their cement if we have to.
If they choose to put cement there, we have that right, and it'll be in that easement agreement, yes.
Thank you.
Great question.
Other questions for Dennis? Okay. So this is a public hearing, so at this time I would like to open up the public testimony portion of that. I have a list here. Do not have any names on this. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to testify on this matter? Seeing none, I will close the public testimony portion of this. One minor housekeeping issue is that the council bill is actually 20-1000, so there should not be a 1 there on the end there. So once we get to the approval of that. See, I got that before you did, Dan.
Did you get the other one? There was another one that was wrong too that I
I
didn't say
did
anything
not.
about. Now that you opened a can of worms. There was one that was short, so resolution 20006, should that have been 20006?
0005 was wrong.
Okay. But they're only, never mind. Let's,
Yeah.
we're good, Mr. Mayor.
We'll correct it, okay. All right, so we would be looking for council action.
So,
Mr.
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, I'd like to move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 20-1000 by title only.
second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 20-1000, an ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene vacating a portion of Celtice Way right-of-way, generally described as a parcel of land adjoining the southerly boundary of tax number 8882, tax number 10490, and tax number 22364 in the City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing for the publication of a summary of this ordinance and an effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Kukin,
Yeah.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. On this next motion, that was the one that Dennis had requested that we add, if council chooses, agreements to the preservation of the existing water line to the end of there, so.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for council to adopt Council Bill 20-1001 and add the preservation of existing water line.
Easement.
And second, with the acknowledgement that that is 1000.
Yes,
Correct.
yeah. So Kiki, that was, so you said existing water line easement. Yeah, so easement is at the very end there, yes. Mhm. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Renata?
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Guggen,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. When they say wood, does your head kind of give it? You want to say yes?
Gotta start signing
We're
my
gonna
name
fight over that
differently,
name.
Christie.
Yeah. So we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn if someone chooses to do
Nah, I
that.
want to stay here.
So
Well,
moved.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.